but we also hope to learn from you during this workshop. So if you're able to come on and sit on here, and we're going to show you how we're going to get everyone engaged and getting to know each other. So everyone at the back, please come through. Please take up some of the seats on here. Okay.
Yeah, hi guys. Good afternoon, guys. My name is Ramadhan Ali, and I'm a visual storyteller and a photographer. Yeah, so today I'm going to try and make this a participatory kind of a workshop, and I have a ball here. So when you get the ball, you say your name and where you're from, and then pass it to someone you feel should introduce themselves. If that's okay? So we start. I'm going to throw it at random, so it's not by choice. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ivy Nyawera. I'm from a research farm called Odipo Dev, Kenya. So we are professionals in data journalism and research. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to the session.
Hi, my name is Lena Grace Anyolo. I'm a writer and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Faith Mwangi. I'm a social media manager, and yeah, I'm also excited to learn from everyone.
Three more introductions.
Okay.
So if you introduce yourself right now, you won't be talking a lot. You're saving yourself essentially.
Okay, but go ahead, introduce you. Okay, so okay, carry on, and then after you, I will go.
Hello, my name is Dennis Muga. I'm a writer. I work at World Resources Institute, but I'm also working at the festival for Baraza Media Lab for the next few days. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Who has the ball? Who's the last one with the ball? Just give it to him. He'll be the one to start answering the question.
But that helps us have a feel and an understanding of who is in the room. Of course, this is geared towards photographers. Ramadan is a photographer. I myself am not. And we'll give a bit of context into who we are. Thank you to everyone that's introduced themselves. So today's discussion is about moving from observation to responsibility. And I'm just going to ask Ramadan to briefly introduce himself, and then we'll get into it.
Again, hi guys. So my name is Ramadhan Ali, and I'm a photographer and a visual storyteller. I usually work with marginalized communities, more essentially in Kibra and the Nubian community. So pleasure to be here today. And I'm also a fitness model, though this is my before picture.
Okay, and my name is Anesu Chikumba. I am from Zimbabwe, and I'm founder of Unpublished Africa, which is an organization supporting emerging African visual storytellers. I'm happy to see some faces that have come to our events here in Nairobi before, so thank you for coming through today. And we have supported creatives in 27 African countries to date, and run in-person activities in 7 countries. And if you just go to the next slide, you'll see these are the communities that we've started in the last 2 years. We've been running for 4 years, but essentially, when photographers interact with us, they come to us, they know we will have their first exhibition, first publication, first professional development program to do with the creative industries. And we are that stepping stone for sustainable careers, right? And today we're talking about, again, observation to responsibility, and we're just going to go through a series of topics that you can see on here. And again, because when people interact with us, we're normally the first point of access into I suppose, the creative industries, and what they gain from us is credibility and visibility, right? Visibility, I'm sure we can all appreciate, has positive things to do with it. A lot of us, if we are content creators, photographers, we want our work to go viral. We want to be associated with multinationals. We want our work to be seen in galleries, magazine, and so forth, right? Because there are benefits to visibility. But the other side of that is that visibility comes with a lot of risk. So visibility itself is a multiplier, right? Whatever opportunity you get from an image, if I see your work today and I'm like, okay, why don't you submit it for this and that? That gives you insight into what you can do, right? And from there, you might tap into other opportunities. You might have your work on exhibition, like we have on the entrance here. But the thing that we are more concerned about today is visibility coming with risk. So if you upload a picture onto, social media, who's on Instagram? Who has an account on Instagram that they use for business, for their work? TikTok? Are we using social media? Right? We're using social media for our work. But when you upload something onto the online space, you cannot control what happens post that fact, right? You took a picture, you then decided, okay, this is great, I want to publish this onto my Instagram account. From there, again, the positives are obvious. A gallery might take interest, a curator might send a message to you and ask to feature your work in an exhibition, and so forth. But then that work can be recontextualized, right? I'm sure we've seen work that's been put in newspapers, magazines, and just a caption has been put on there, but we don't have insight into what the photographer intended to tell and the story that they intended to tell on there. So again, just for us to be on the same page, visibility is being seen, and we're exploring it in the context of the photographer and the photographed, the people that are in the images we capture, right? So just going to go onto a slide with a photographer from DRC whom we've worked with. And Joyce had a solo exhibition with us last year, and she documented a farmer that was dealing with the effects of climate change. And on here, you can see that there are identifiers to do with the man, right? So if you can see on here, we have his name, Jean-Paul Nkwe. We have his location, which was specified. His economic losses were detailed. And those are the risks that we start to look at on here. So of course, I've given you this one for you to see like how to identify the risks on here. But afterwards, you have the ball. So I'm going to then ask you to also identify some issues that come through. But essentially, this story would have created opportunity for Joyce because she had her first solo exhibition. She had her work featured in a newspaper or like a virtual platform as well, right? And this would have created visibility for her in a positive way. But for Jean-Paul, there are certain things in this story and even just in this caption that you're able to pick up and say, okay, if anything were to happen, or if this story were to get into the wrong hands, these images were to get into the wrong hands, what could happen, right? Because we specified, or she actually would have specified, that the issues he was having that were reducing his income capacity were because of people that were in his community. So we are also seeing that he was having conflict with his community members. And that's a story that was shared and a story that has gone beyond just, the area between Kinshasa and Congo Central. It's gone beyond DRC because we're all here, we're all learning about it. So in the next image, you'll also then see like when visibility builds and when visibility harms. So I'm going to pose a question. So I'm not sure if you want to throw the ball to someone or first answer. Okay, so for those of you that have just joined us, welcome. Once you get the ball turned to you, please quickly introduce yourself and just share your perspective. Have there been any instances that you've seen where visibility has caused risk to the people in the image?
One is documenting cases of sexual abuse and it's actually coincidentally DRC, whereby when the conflict started with the M23, the women were fleeing their villages and there were cases of rape happening. When we met the women in the clinics and they were sharing their stories, there was a very big ethical dilemma because we needed to protect them first and foremost. But then we also felt the relevance of sharing their stories. So we really had to collectively decide how do we then photograph these women in an ethical way without harming them. And thankfully, one of the things that we were lucky to have is they graciously agreed to taking the photos, but we had to show, we did not allow ourselves to show any revealing. So their faces, none of that was visible in the photos. We changed their names during publication. Even when you're mentioning a child, you change their name and only use one singular name and not using a surname, for example, because then that makes it easy for them to be traced. And also the elements of location. So you do not need to be, to go down to specifics, to the name of the village, the name of the city. You can just say if it's Beni, Kivu, DRC, or Kinshasa, DRC, which is, it's massive. So you cannot just go and locate them. So yes, I have seen those cases, but at least also been able to, together with the communities, find solutions to those issues. Yeah.
Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you.
You can throw the ball to someone else. Okay, so do you think that the responsibility to conceal the identifiable things that he said, such as face, name, all of these, is up to the editor, or is it on the photographer side? Who carries the responsibility of protecting the individuals in the photograph?
My name is Olo. I'm from Kibra Project Organization. I think your question, it applies to both. I'm currently working on an investigative piece, the death of kids in Damsite, Dandora. All the things that he has said, I've expressed them, and I believe all the participants in any case should take responsibility. Yes.
Okay. That was a safe answer, I'm going to say. But it's true that both do carry responsibility. And I think it's easy for us to throw responsibility to each other, right? To say, I'm just going to submit this. And then if the editor approves, I'm sure that they will take note of what we need to remove and what we needed to add on, right? In terms of information. But when it comes to, and I really like the example that you gave, Eugene, thank you for sharing, to do with actually being, as a photographer, the ones to take responsibility before you have submitted your work anywhere, to take note of what are the possible risks that could happen once this image is published, and should I really be passing it on? Is there anything that I, as a photographer, would first need to conceal or hide or change or edit out, right? And if you see the image again with Nkoi, we see his face, we see the people that he's working with, we know his location, all of that, right? Which shows that documentary work isn't only creative output. I think a lot of photographers start off as, okay, I'm doing something creative, and then maybe your work gets picked up, and then you take on street photography and you start to take interest in storytelling. But the starting point is just realizing that even though it is in a way just creative output and you're creating, and an image might be aesthetically pleasing, there's more to that image. And Ramadan is going to go into storytelling versus story taking for us to understand what your images can do and how to consider the before effects.
Yeah, hi again. So, okay. Nicholas, just maintain the ball because I feel you are going to relate so much with this because you're coming from Dandora. I'm coming from Kibra. So I have a question to the room. Whenever you see an image of Kibra in the internet or the publications, what do you usually think about Kibera for the first time when you see the photo?
Kibera.
Yeah.
It's security.
Yeah. Pass the ball.
Yeah, security.
Just one word. Just pass the ball.
I'd say a slum.
Yeah, pass the ball.
You're just going. Protest hotspots.
Okay.
Despair.
Okay, we can just stop there. It's okay, it's cool. So we've seen these images before and we've interacted them, we've shared them online, but we've never understood the repercussions on what the stereotypes holds for the people, right? Because most of the time the images usually circulate online, but the stereotype still builds with the people, right? So, yeah. Okay. So we're coming on directly to what storytelling or storytelling is. So storytelling is usually not evil in its essence, and it's usually driven by incentives. You can think about the publications of the daily, it's usually outcome driven, it's deadline driven. And the theme of actually storytelling is usually just finding, capture, publishing, and moving on, right? Storytelling, however, is the opposite of the same, Storytelling is usually slower, it's risk aware, and it usually prioritizes dignity over distribution. So I have an image next. So the question comes in, when you frame your narrative with your photo, what do you usually think? Why does it matter in disadvantages community? No? Yeah. Can you give her a mic?
I just want us, before we continue, first, I am completely blind, so I don't know what pictures are on whatever.
Yeah.
And also, you need to factor in that, yes, whatever we're talking about is very relevant.
Yeah.
But the more you continue, it's like you're completely leaving me behind because you are speaking from a sighted point of view.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yes.
I'll take that into consideration. Right?
Yeah. So there's also captioning that people do. So also factor in that some of your audiences and your creatives are also not seeing, but they are interacting with the photo that you have. So if it's a photo on the whatever slide, you can just, before you can ask the question or say whatever you're about to say, you can just caption by, this is a photo of this and that and that.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
So Anesu will help me on that. Yeah. So as I was saying, why does it matter? Why does it matter more in disadvantages community? Because in places of power, whenever a narrative is usually pushed behind or a story comes out in a place of power, first of all, the PR teams will push back. There'll be consequences towards you as a photographer or somebody who pushed up that story. But for a disadvantaged community, why this is important to actually frame your image in a nice way, it's because it becomes a permanent identity for the people. We had the story about somebody saying it's a slum, somebody saying it's a place of people having riots and stuff. So that's how everybody views people from Kibera out here, So what does it do? The framing of the photo actually affects the investment in the place. So the government will usually come and say, okay, you're saying that Kibera needs some help, but why are we helping people who are dirty, violent, and hopeless, So the same thing, the policy effect, it changes policy, and also it has an employment bias. This happened to me several times. You're applying for a job, But the moment you're going to say that you're coming from Kibra, it's already a disadvantage for you. People will see you as a disadvantage to the community, you know? You can describe the photo.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the photo in front of the screen is of two people actually trying to rummage something from the sewage. Yeah. They're trying to clean up the sewage. Yeah. And this photo was taken during the World Cleanup Day. So my question goes back to the person with the ball. If you want to answer the question or pass the ball, it would be nice. Yeah? Yeah, you can just pass the ball. Yeah. So essentially, my question is, whenever you see a photo of somebody in sewage or dirty waters on the internet, what immediately comes to your mind?
It also depends on my experience.
Yeah.
So if I am the person who I have done it before, I will just think, okay, I guess they are cleaning because I have done it.
Yeah.
But if you've never done it before, you'll be like, okay, for me who's lived in Nairobi all my life, coming through sewage is not, we danced and played with the sewage, whatever. So the first thing is, why is that happening? Is it, are they interacting with the sewage for good, or are they just being disgusting people? Yeah,
exactly.
So you have a question, it's a both ways. It's not the first thing without, ooh, it's, oh yeah, that is disgusting, but what are they really doing? Yeah.
Exactly. That takes me to what I was essentially wanted to talk about, the narrative and the framing behind the photo. So I have two headlines of the same photo that will actually tell you how the conditioning works, yeah? And how you can actually correct it with the right framing and narrative. So the first headline is Life in Africa's Largest Slums, Resident Forced to Live Among Filth, you know? And then the caption will be, young men went through toxic waste in search of recoverable materials to sell in Kibra, Nairobi, as poor sanitations continue to define daily life in one of Africa's largest informal settlements. So whenever you hear about that or read about that on the internet, what do you think about the people? You just see them as people who are living in filth on the daily, right? So now the version of this, why is it storytelling? Because the perspective is focused on the dirt, yeah? The men are becoming the symbols of poverty on this photo, and there's no mention of initiative, right? And then, now again, when the photo is used on the correct context, yeah, Kibra youth lead drainage cleanup during World Cleanup Day, yeah? It makes sense, yeah? The photo now has context and the right framing, right? So the caption is, members of a local youth group clear blocked drainage channels in Kibra as part of community-led cleanup initiative marking World Cleanup Day. So essentially, storytelling doesn't avoid the harsh realities. The reality still remains, you know? We still have the problems around, we still have everything. So one thing I like a favorite quote from Larry Madowo when he said that in Africa, he's supposed to tell Africa accurately, but not tell about stories about Africa positively, you know? So our goal is to actually show the accuracy in everything we do, essentially with the photos that we use, you know? So the perspective now changes. The focus shifts from filth to action, you know? The men are the agents and not the victims, you know? And then it shows the community is organized despite all the problems that you're going through. And then the image becomes a responsibility and resilience, you know? So that's the difference essentially. One was storytaking and the other one was storytelling. Are we on the same boat there? Yeah? You good? Nice. So for decades, Africa has always been framed because of war, famine, diseases, slum, you know? And then the critic has always been on foreign media, you know? Why are the foreign people coming here to show us how you're living and stuff, you know? But now the thing is, we are repeating the same pattern, as Africans. We have started to do the same thing. Why? Because poverty sells, The farmer in photo sells, Yeah? And then the question has always been, I'm going to justify the photo by saying it's for awareness. But the question now comes in. Yeah? Awareness for whom? If it's the way Moamin went and captured the Ethiopian famine, yeah, it was for awareness and it created an initiative for them to actually solve the famine, right? But if your photo is not going to spark that conversation, yeah? So we're coming to the next second question. Awareness towards what exactly, And then awareness that produces what structural change. So one thing is, we've always said that funding or being commissioned, you will always hide behind the fact that saying that, oh, I've been funded to do this project, so I'll have to put out this kind of photos, or I've been commissioned to do this. But I always say every time that funding and commissioning is not the villain. The problem is usually the kind of narrative or the visual narrative that has been the system structure that keeps on giving the visual narrative that's being rewarded every time. So the problem is not the processes, but the structure of the system behind it. Why do we keep on doing and repeating the same images, Yeah. Yeah, good.
Okay, so within the unpublished Africa ecosystem, we will tend to prioritize storytelling over story taking. We prioritize a series over a single image. And curious to know if whoever has the ball can throw it to the next person or pass it down. I'm curious to know, when you publish an image, what are you hoping to get from that? Or if you were to publish an image.
My name is Winnie from Buni Media. And I would say connection and somebody to relate to the story I'm trying to tell through the image.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if you can pass the ball to someone else. Thank you, Winnie. Okay, in terms of viewership, if you were to publish an image, or let's say on your own social media accounts, what do you hope happens? Are you more conscious of your followers, likes, the people that are engaging with the image? What do you look for?
Thank you very much. I think two ideas pop onto my mind is raising awareness. I know this is very cliche, but also dignity. So especially for women, because I think sometimes I notice that a woman might not be aware how she's portrayed because she doesn't see the image. So it's very important for us who take the photo to be aware. Will she be okay? Like, one of the things that a colleague told me and I use is that, will you be okay to have your sister pictured in that way, or your mother, or someone who is very close to you? If you're okay, then go ahead, and if not, there is a problem. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, I really like what you spoke about, dignity. That's something that is very important. And when we work with photographers, or when we receive submissions for exhibitions or publications, we notice that sometimes the work itself is strong, the image is strong, you can see they're telling a story, but then the captioning might be a bit of an issue, right? And again, I suppose because dignity can also be taken in different ways, it's then saying, are you reinforcing that within the caption when you're now telling more about the story beyond the image itself, right? And another thing that we prioritize as in Publish Africa is, again, publishing with context. It's, when we're looking at photography just as extraction, or photography as something that could make you go viral or make you famous or put you in a gallery, and, something that you could commercialize and make money from, we sometimes forget the context aspect to say, am I representing the people in this image well? And I like your example. I normally ask, would you be okay seeing your child or your niece or nephew in a gallery? And not just depicted in a certain way, but just seeing their face and knowing that your family didn't know that they were going to be on exhibition, right? So with, I suppose, that comes through the aspect of context through captioning. We also receive a lot of captions that are very, imaginative. It might be a picture of a person sitting on a corner, and then, photographer writes, this person was pondering about this and that, right? But at that point, did you go and talk to them? Did you engage with the person that you were capturing? Of course, you aren't always in a position to do so, but that then brings up the question of consent. Are they consenting to having their picture taken? If you're not in a position to gain consent, then you're now looking at, are you able to, to capture them without showing identifiable features that Eugene would have mentioned earlier on, right? So just going to go on to, okay, you're ahead of the game. But on this slide, we have an image of a lady walking with like a basket of shells or something to catch shells, and then she puts it into a bucket, and then she is collecting shells from the ground and putting them into the bucket, and then a picture of shells in the bucket and a picture of the lady again back in the water, right? And when we look at these images by themselves, who has the ball? Kindly pass the ball on in the mic. But you have spoken, so. Okay. Of course, because we are crediting all of the photographers that are in this presentation, okay, but it has been covered on here. What would you think she is doing with these shells without context, with just the images as they are?
I think it might be a creative pursuit. Like maybe she's going to use them to grind, to fabricate something else.
Okay. Do you want to pass it on and get another answer?
I think it's an artisan working with maybe jewelry or, trying to create something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the captions are, when we then put the captions on, at the bottom, the crediting shows you that the photographer's name is Hawa Kane. She's published with us before, and she is from Senegal. So I am from a landlocked country. We don't pick shells on the regular, right? So I wouldn't necessarily know what the options and the possibilities would be. But through the captions, we then realize that she is collecting these shells to finish the construction of her house. I wouldn't have known that you can use shells to build a house, right? That is context. It might not even be at a country level, but at the community level, city level, and then community level, right? So when we're talking about localization, we're not just talking about, okay, I'm from Zimbabwe, and as a Zimbabwean, you would expect me to know certain things. There are certain factors that I wouldn't know that affect communities that are beyond my immediate one, right? And the point that we're trying to drive home here is, of course, when we capture images, we might be traveling, but if you do get a chance to bring in a person on to give you that context and to explain. For Hurricane specifically, most of the work that she has sent through has been through a series. So on here we can see that she would have taken time with the lady, with Mama Ijewa. She's asked questions, and then she's gone beyond just taking pictures and getting context, but she would have also gotten consent to be able to publish the work, right? So consent, we normally think about it in terms of taking a picture, like, can I please take your picture? And then I'm going to go and do what I want to do. And I might monetize it, put it in a gallery. There are different options of what you could do with a single image. But consent goes beyond that and it travels beyond that moment to say, they've allowed me to take this picture, but are they allowing me to publish it in an exhibition? Are they allowing me to sell it during the exhibition? Are they allowing me to publish this in the newspaper, and in what context as well? Because if I were to decide, or if Howard were to decide to put these images onto a stock platform, right? There are a lot of stock platforms that I'm hoping photographers are putting their work on. But when that image is taken and it's licensed off, what then happens to context? And will there be context provided, right? So those are all considerations that we then have to have. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to move past this story, which was also a similar story with Abajai Justin, who is a photographer from Benin, published with us in 2024. And on here, it's an image of a mother breastfeeding on a lake, right? How many of us have been on a canoe and successfully canoed? But to canoe and breastfeed a baby across the lake shows that that's something that is within the day-to-day, right? So we get that there are then certain things that evoke curiosity within the image to say, okay, so where are they? It might not have the location. Of course, we know that he's from Benin, but we might not know where in Benin he is from. We might not know what is going on and why she might be so skilled. So that also is a way of getting that curiosity from the viewer to then go and do some research. If you're not able to get all of the context, you can still, when you're captioning your images and putting them in places, leave enough out that you're able to get people to look for the information themselves. And in the second image, we, I suppose, have people trading on the lake, which when the photographer explains, he says that it's a family buying from a fruit seller on the Janvier floating market in Benin. And in his artist statement, he then gave context to say that these are communities where water has essentially taken over their land. And he's giving context in terms of climate change and creating more visibility, awareness, and I suppose sharing stories about how people are going about their day-to-day in his local community, right? And we're now going to get into a case study, which Ramadan is going to take us through.
Yeah, most definitely. So I have two case studies, but I think we'll study on one. So the Nubian community, I'll have to give a context on who the Nubians are. The Nubians came in Kenya during the pre-colonial period fighting for the British, and they were soldiers essentially for the British. And then they were given Kibra as part of, like saying thank you, thank you for their service, yeah? So how Kibra came about, it was a story of, now because the soldiers were already decommissioned and they wanted something to earn from, So everybody had land, and somebody came and they were told, yeah, build yours and build mine, you get? So build yours and build mine. That's how Kibra came about. And that's how the Nubians became landlords over the land. So why am I talking about something about land? Land is usually power. It's usually belonging, and it's usually his citizenship and history. When you report on land, you're reporting on identity. That's why you need to be careful whenever you're dealing with such issues, right? So our first case study happened in 2001 when the president, the then president, the late Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, came to Kibra. And that time I was in class 3, and we're just seated right below him when he was talking about this, He was saying that after today, people in Kibra are not going to pay rent, And then the repercussions of that came about. But the question that didn't run over the media that time, because media was the only source of information. There was no social media fact checking, or there was no somebody to come and say, to ask the right questions, essentially, right? So the first question that would have been asked before publishing was it a misquote? Did everybody misquote the president, right? And then what is the legal status of the land? You educate the people on what the land is about, yeah? Who owns what? And what happens if rent stops overnight, you know? They didn't ask those questions, yeah? And what happened next? Can you like play on that? Just hover over the video and play.
October 31st, 2001 is the day Nubians will never forget. It was when President Moi announced that no one had a right to demand rent from tenants in Kibra.
Wewe ulikuwa unaongoza nchi hii, wewe mwenyewe ndio ulisema utapeana haki. Leo unaanza kusema tunakaa kwa hii hapa tulipe kodi. Hii ni elimu gani?
This was the repercussion of the political statements that were made on that day.
So essentially, that's how misinformation or whatever is being published that's not even there's no due diligence behind it. That's usually the repercussions and the communities feel it, you know? So I'm going to skip the second case study and go directly to back to you. Yeah.
Okay, so we would like to know your thoughts on, I suppose, the kind of due diligence that you would have wanted the visual storytellers to include, or would have thought should have been an obvious step. And where's our microphone? You can pass it to anyone. So in terms of due diligence, what do you think should have been included, or what would you have wanted to be done?
First of all, my regard, I think that in due diligence, also you first have to see at what you're communicating in your photo. Sometimes people can place photos somewhere, and you see a photo is an imagery, and it can interpret different things to different people. So I think the photographs should be taken. There should be so much obvious that everyone can have the same image, because some pictures, if you place them, people can have different perspective, because according to psychology, people see the world according to how they view themselves. So maybe someone can, in certain profession, can see it as different thing than other profession. That's about due diligence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, while you pass it to someone else, anyone else? And if you would like to share as well, you can just put up your hand and we'll hand the mic to you. But we know that when it comes to publishing surrounding not just documentary work per se, but even just photojournalism, there is a bit of urgency that comes to play, right? You want to publish it when the story is hot, and you might be looking at pressures that I suppose would be influencing your publishing decisions. Like we have speed, exposure, opportunity, and competition. What other pressures have you experienced, or might you experience, and what are you willing to forego in a publishing decision?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Olum. I am not a photographer or really an image maker, you can say, but I do to pay the bills. I'm a marketing manager for a nonprofit called the Sonda Project. And to, a little bit less money, but what I do prefer is I'm also a travel and culture journalist. So in both of those arenas, I do have to think about these things. I would say when it comes to images and image making, particularly in quote unquote disadvantaged communities, of course, my nonprofit work is a little bit more related to that. And for us, a pressure or like something that influences publishing decisions in terms of how a visual story is told, what images are chosen, what images are even taken at all. A lot of that has to do with of course, telling individual stories with dignity. So as much as possible, we will name people and give specific quotes after having sat down and caught up with, for example, a family that is a beneficiary of one of our projects or a student. And so that to the end of either, catching the interest of possible donors to, donate to a project, either individuals or funds or organizations, and also, to the dignity point, which is very much to not tell an individual to not tell a generalized story, but to have all of those different, basically to humanize the communities that we work with. So a lot of it has to do with what I get told often in some of my instructions, which I do have a lot of leeway, but a lot of it is like, we want to see smiling faces. It would be better if we have a family with both parents, because that might look a little bit better, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very much like attracting donations and donors and basically making the projects look like a success, and like they would push somebody to, that they look like viable projects to support. So that's one thing for me personally.
Okay. So just as a follow-up question, sorry. So yesterday on main stage, there was the live podcast, and Jerry mentioned that for some of the stories that she worked on, they would be with the communities for up to a year or for a very long time. Between your travel photography and your documentary work with the NGOs, what are the timeline differences and how much room do you have to engage with the community, people around you, and the environment?
When it comes to my travel stories, a little bit, different in that it's a little bit more like individual to my own experiences, really. And of course, there is context and there is like encounters with people, but that's a little bit more short term, unless it is of the places that I live. So I do write often about Kenya and about the North Coast where I live and everything. So that's slightly different because I'm here. And I also have the context of my few decades alive here. When it comes to my NGO work, we have teams on the ground in the countries where we work, which are Malawi and Burkina Faso. And so our in-country teams are very much parts of these communities in the sense that they are much more checking in and in contact with the communities that we're working with. And as far as myself and the parts of the teams who do not live in country, will come in and really have to kind of speed through and spend afternoons or days or maybe overnight in particular villages because of, the amount of time that we have for that trip. So it's a combination really of myself going in and often by now having been with the organization for a little while, repeat visits and seeing lots of people for the second or third time. And we are also with our team who they know much better, like the in-country facilitators, etc. So a lot of them are kind of long-term relationships with the organization as a whole, and I am one piece of that organization as the marketing person.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And you can pass on to someone else. Okay, so going to ask a question again surrounding publishing, but this time to do with what might need to be withheld. I think Eugene gave us some clues earlier on when he shared his story surrounding needing to hide faces, needing to remove some of the names. But what are some features that you think are worth withholding or that might lead you to delay publishing a photo story?
Sometimes when you want to publish, you have a story in mind, and you are the storyteller. So I am Eve Kibaref, and I have a YouTube channel telling my story of losing my sight after 5 years ago. So when you have the idea of what story you are supposed to tell, but then there is what perception people have outside. So sometimes the fear I had in the beginning was a blind person is supposed to look a certain way because that is what people have always known for it to be. And certain conversations are only supposed to be hush conversations. And I'm supposed to look, let's not miserable, but not too trendy. Like, I'm not supposed to look flashy. I'm not supposed, maybe if I like making my nails, or if I like doing my hair, or I like, going out and having fun, I'm not supposed to do that because people are going to ask, why am I helping somebody who's having fun? Why am I helping, or why am I supporting, not helping really, but why am I supporting you and you're not publishing what I want to see? I want to see your sad story, and your sad story is no longer sad, so I no longer relate to it. So you withhold sharing your story because there's the perception of what is out there versus the story you really want to tell. I don't know if I've gone in top. I was still in topic.
Yes, you have. Okay, and to your left, Eugene.
Hi. So I wanted just to say a few things. Just might circle back a bit to the first question that you had around consent. I think taking in all that you've said, another aspect that I've found to be really important when taking consent is letting them know that they have the right to withdraw their consent at any given time, whether that's a day after the story has been collected, 6 months, a year down the road, and also letting them know. And in cases of when you're doing photography or you're doing storytelling for a humanitarian agency, it's really important to let them know that denial of consent does not mean that the NGO will stop giving you services. You need to let them know that, because sometimes there's an element of, what if I deny them consent? That means they may stop working in our community. But you need to be very clear and very front on letting them know that, regardless of whatever decision you make, we will still be working with you. And you do have a right to tell us at some point, 3 months, 6 months, that you do not want us to use your image, and we will stop using it. And to go to the other question that you had around considerations that you have to make before publishing, I think I had mentioned the things that you can withhold, but I also think another thing that I had forgotten to mention is sometimes it's also important to withhold the name of the photographer, because depending on the context of where you're working in, that name has a way of making its way into the wrong people's radar. So you might be crossing a border, you might be on the airport, and they might see, so you're Eugene. We saw this photo you took of this community that doesn't represent what we think is the true reality of the lived experiences. So sometimes you do have to do that. And I've seen that happen, especially when the M23 rebels took over Goma. And we had to share photos from the DRC, and we had to withhold the names of the photographers. And so lastly, another thing that perhaps not within the examples you gave, but things to take into consideration when publishing is sometimes the country context matters, in the sense that you may go somewhere and collect a story. It's reading very well. You like what the narrative is flowing, the images are really good, the videos are really good. So you're thinking of probably even doing a campaign around that story. But another consideration I feel like has to be made within the context of the country's regulations. So an example I can give is when in 2023, when the Turkey-Syria earthquake happened, a lot of humanitarian agencies fled into Turkey. And the government of Turkey, at some point, started to feel like the public believed that all these things that are happening in Turkey after the earthquake are all being done by the humanitarian agencies and not the government. So whenever we were thinking of publishing a story, we had to be really careful about how do we phrase some things about. So we put up a water tank. So did we put the water tank up by ourselves? Did we have any support from the community? The way you phrase the narrative had to read in a particular way whereby the government wouldn't feel like you're pushing them aside. And this is important because when you do go to renew your license to operate in that country, they're going to go back and see how you published stories, how you represented them, and they're going to come at you and tell you, we don't feel like you actually took us seriously, and for this reason, we will not renew your license. And so it's another consideration to make, just on top of the ones that you suggested. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have a gentleman here.
Thanks. I'll speak especially for journalists who operate in community media in the country where I work. And I totally identify with my colleague from Kibra through the presentations around the Nubian community. As an editor who edits stories at Pamoja FM, the voice of Kibra Slum, I think one major factor, aside from the security of journalists, is even the security of the station itself. That you have to decide that I'm not going to publish this photo because if I publish this photo, faction A will come here and attack us. And so how we frame even our stories, us as community media journalists, it's purely different from our colleagues in mainstream media because the issue around contextualization of issues is very important for us. And we get many a times where our colleagues in mainstream media misreport on stories specifically within the communities because they want to, make the story big. And it is us in the community who end up being affected. A typical story, if my brother remembers it very well, there has been a feud in Kibra where, between a mosque and a church. At the end of the day, as an editor, I'll never publish a photo of any of them because these are our listeners. So such things end as make us question whether we are doing journalism or PR. Thanks.
Thank you. And I suppose you've helped us segue into the next section. But since we did have this image on the screen, which is the first image is of 2 children dancing. And the images are by Pabalo Mahatla from Lesotho, who is one of our Unpublished Africa alumni. And the first image, again, 2 children dancing. The second is 2 older gentlemen dancing. And from this, we had spoken about sometimes needing to edit in a way that you are then hiding certain features, right? And within the first image, these are pictures of children. Us as Unpublished Africa, when we set guidelines, Ramadan and I were having a conversation earlier on that we tend to get a lot of submissions where photographers don't follow the guidelines for publication within publications or for exhibitions, right? And the 2 main things that we take note of are, can we see any faces in an image? Are there any identifiable features that anyone within the person's community would be able to tell, oh, that's this person? And are there any pictures that show children's faces? We don't publish children's faces, pictures of children's faces, and we're very strict about that. So this, I think, was a perfect example of her still telling her story where she writes, I see how artistic and expressive my people are, yet their craft is not celebrated to a point that they make means of living on it, right? So just showing traditional dances, but also just showing how in the first image, she edits the faces away. And in the second, she captures in such a way that she doesn't have the faces of the dancers, but the story is still relayed. But over to you on community.
So I'm going to essentially cover the role of community as ethical infrastructure. So the role of community in slowing down harmful practice. Most of us as emerging storytellers, we usually don't have editors, we don't have a legal team, we don't have an institution of protection behind us. And suddenly, when you're alone, the urgency usually gets louder. The deadlines feel heavier and exposure feels necessary because you want to trend, you want to earn a buck, So every time you do that, your ethics usually goes out of the window, So why community is infrastructure? Think about roads, think about electricity, think about water. There are things that are every day, but you can't see them because they run behind the scenes, So when community is present, stories are contextualized, misrepresentation is challenged, narratives are correctable, and trust regulates your behavior, So I'm going to give you basically what ethical community looks like. First is peer review before publishing, yeah? You have to show the story to someone from the community to actually tell you if this is accurate, and what's missing behind this story, And then doing that shifts the question from is this publishable to is this fair, It's such a, So we're coming to constant rechecks. And that's when we are talking about the story of consent, yeah? Whenever you're saying that initial consent is not permanent consent. Consent can change every time, So before publication, return and say, this is how the story is going to be used. Are you still comfortable with it? You give them the context of how the story is going to be used. And if he feels he or she is being misrepresented, you have to check again. Do I still have your consent for this? Yeah, if you don't have the consent, you have to wait and see if, and change the story and see how to work around it, And then the shared red lines. Whenever we usually go into certain communities, yeah, especially talking about what Anesu talked about, where they don't publish children in publications, and then no exposure of religious tensions, as you said, and then no naming during conflict. And sometimes in other communities, they don't allow filming or photographing during mourning, So shared red lines means, So shared red lines means you don't impose your journalistic standard alone. You also listen to the local cultural boundaries to help guide you towards the story, And then the most important part, the most important part is usually returning after publication. You're coming back to show them the final piece and explaining impact and listening to feedback. What usually this does is actually it's actually cultivating trust within the community, So after publishing a story, you can come back and do another story and the community will still be receptionable to you. And then screening locally first, especially for documentaries and photo essays. Global audience and a local audience understand things differently, right? So coming back to show them, it doesn't mean that they're giving you veto power or permission. It's just to show them that, you want to surface the blind spots, So it actually means that you treated them not as content, but you are part of the collaboration story, And the last thing is remaining reachable. Sometimes when you're in a community and you're working in a community, when you want to publish a story and tomorrow you're going to meet the same person, you'll always likely to frame them in a correct way because every time it will be a question on your character. So after publishing the story and you want to go back to the community and everything, you have to remain reachable. You have to remain reachable because sometimes there are other articles that are going to be made based on your story and they still need to have question answered. So for you to do that, it means you're ethical and you're practicing it the right way. So back to you, Anesu.
Okay, thank you. So before I go into this session quickly, yes, here on.
I have a question. My name is Neodai Afote. I'm from Ghana. I'm a visual storyteller and a theater practitioner. So my question is based on a puberty rite that we do in Ghana. It's called the Dipo rite. Now it's young girls transitioning from teenage to adulthood. So they do these rites for those girls. Now they're supposed to be naked with just beads around their waist and on their neck. Now, as a visual storyteller, as a photographer, if you want to tell the true story of the Tipo rite, how would you want to go about it without revealing the nakedness of these young girls?
You can answer that or throw it to the community. I don't have experience on it.
Okay, I suppose I would have more from a, for us, because we more deal with publishing. If you are not able to conceal that, we wouldn't be in a position to publish. And that is just the nature of the organization that we have. So in addition to the production aspect, we're saying, how do you capture and how do you tell the story authentically? There's also the side of how, where do you want to share the story is also very important. Because even for that, locally, within the community, people would understand, because I'm assuming the festivals would happen regularly, right? But beyond the community, you still want to share the story in a way that, for lack of a better term, the story will be received well, but without removing context, without removing what you want to really tell that is part of the story. And with that as well, captioning then becomes your friend. So if you're not, or if you feel your writing isn't as good, collaborating with writers and bringing other people that are part of the community to share the story would also be very important. So at that point, it's no longer just about the image itself, but the story that you're telling and how you're able to bring on different partners to share different aspects that you might not be able to visually share, given the platforms that you want to publish on. Because even if you are publishing online, there are guidelines, where your image can get taken down, your account can get blocked. And at the end of the day, you then need to ask yourself, are you looking to share that nakedness and risk the story itself not reaching the people that you want it to reach? Right, so there are lots of considerations, but if your goal at the end is to have that story reach certain platforms, and platforms being people that are then able to take that in and learn something, then you need to still consider, how can I make sure that it stays on there, that they're able to still learn about this, but while also respecting the guidelines that are put on the platform. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I suppose in the last, we have another question.
Hi, my name is Okumu Ongulu. I am a creator, and I also have a YouTube channel called All About Africa. My question is, how do you handle a scenario where my desire is to go all around Africa, interviewing people, taking videos, photos. So how do you handle a situation where you've already done your video, you've posted it on the channels, and just like somebody has mentioned, somebody can withdraw consent 6 months later. How do you handle a situation where you've posted your video and then you're called and they say, I'm withdrawing my consent to be on this video, and it's already up, maybe it's already even gone viral. How do you handle a situation like that?
So I'm going to speak from personal experience here. I once did a project on drug abuse in Kibra, and then part of it was a lady who was actually part of the group, but in the next 6 months, she actually got married, and the husband was scrolling on the socials, and then she saw her wife. So the wife called me in the middle of the night and told me, my husband has brought a fuss over this, so I want you to pull it down. For me, the photo went viral. It was good. It is framing, everything, the narrative was right. But then I asked myself a question: what am I going to benefit from this photo already? Because it's already there. People saw it. People already read about it. What now am I going to experience with this photo? So what I did is just actually pull it down, Yeah, I pulled it down. So yeah, that's it. But it depends though. That's me. I'm speaking from my experience though. Maybe somebody else in the group has another experience.
Okay. And I suppose, okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I think I speak from the same perspective as anyone reporting on NGO or community-related projects, and you're trying to tell stories on behalf of communities. When it comes to consent, I think there have been case scenarios where litigations have picked up pictures that were taken maybe in the publishing and digital area, analog era, and they're still online. And those publications or those individuals are still held accountable. I remember as a student in South Africa, there was a picture that was taken of a child playing, like when we were children, there was an innocence of playing in shorts or your underwear. And you didn't think there was any harm in it. So a picture was taken, and this was one of the big publications in South Africa. And they published it. Now, let's say you're a grown man like yourself, the YouTuber, and you find a picture of yourself as a child and you don't get comfortable with it. So they went back to the publication and they sued, and the courts actually sided with that particular person. So I think you are still accountable for the content that you put out there today in 30 years' time, because the law protects the person who's being represented. If it is a child, the vulnerability that exists now protects that person. So I think you have to keep that in mind. And I think that's something that we have to, even if you're looking at a crowd now of very young creators, I think you have to keep in mind that if you're dealing with communities and vulnerable individuals, people with disabilities, engaging them, creating content around them means that as a content creator, you have lifelong accountability. There is no point where you said, niliacha ku update, or I stopped updating that YouTube channel. I'm no longer working for Nation. I'm a veteran journalist. I've worked in communications over 20 years. And people hold me accountable for content and photography that I took when I was a student. And I still have to answer and be accountable. And if they say, take it down, you take it down. Or have a conversation as regards the legalities of it. So I think one of the beauties of being in a platform like this is accountability, so that it's not, we're creating great content. We are exposing, we're talking about Nubians in Kibra. I've worked with Turkana and Samburu communities. It's great content we're putting out there, but let us know that legally we are accountable. So you can get sued over 30 years, and you might have to pay a lot of money if you don't have evidence of consent. Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me. I just have a question about the role of the release, because as a content creator, particularly in film or TV or radio, I have a release that the subject signed. So I'm wondering, in these kind of, I guess it's more informal, you may not have that tool, or is it something that we might consider? And I've never had a challenge to the release or anything like that, but it seems like that puts the creator in a position to protect the work as it was created.
So this would be in a case where you've shared.
So for example, so I have a television program, right? So all of the actors and their children, all of the actors, their parents signed a release that allows for that content to be published on multiple platforms, et cetera, et cetera. Granted, it's something that's focused on elevating children's content, but likewise, when I'm speaking to people on my podcast, et cetera, it's kind of known, that's a release, like you've given your consent. So the coming back is, I don't necessarily have to, because there's a document that's been signed. So I guess that's the question to creators, whether or not the idea is to formalize it, maybe, just figuring out like what makes sense, because that's what it sounds like this challenge is about, is whether consent was formalized.
Okay, so with that, I suppose that then brings up the conversation of whether just because something is legal doesn't mean that it is ethical. Right? So just because when you leave your house, photographers are allowed to take pictures. Photographers in a lot of African countries are allowed to take a picture of you the minute that you leave your gate, and it's legal for them to use the work. But the conversation then now leans on, but is it ethical for you to do so? Because there's risk that comes up with that, risk not only to the people in the image, risk to yourself. Like we were given an example of risk to the photographer as well, right? And that then brings the conversation to say, okay, just because a person consented in that moment, did they truly understand what they were consenting to? Because content, the minute that it circulates, you don't have control what's going to happen thereafter. Someone can take a short clip and recontextualize it. Someone can take a screen grab of the video podcast and do something else with it, right? And at that point, you then come back to say, okay, but this has now happened and the content has now evolved in this way, but is it still truly representing the people, and are they still feeling represented? Because context can then change. Like he shared the example of the lady that then got married and it became an issue. So she then now reached out, and he was saying that at that point, you're making a decision because you can still say no legally if they've signed, but should you say no? And are you protecting them? All right. But I suppose we are concluding our workshop, and the conversation had now evolved into viral exposure versus sustained careers, which was actually the last bit that we were going to get into. And for us as Unpublished Africa, we do prioritize sustained careers because we are looking at helping creators build sustainable careers. We're not just looking for one publishing opportunity for you to be in a gallery and have your work exhibited once, but we want you to build a career. Like the lady said that, she's had work that she has had to speak up for years later, right? That's a career being built versus one image that went viral. And thereafter, when people look for you and they follow you, they hope to see something. And that begs the question of, what do you want to be known for? But an example of a Nigerian photographer, Adebote Mayowa, who is a climate change photographer. And his work has brought him into various spaces. I mean, on here, we just highlighted, we have his bio, and we highlighted the different things that he's been able to achieve through his work, being focused on one specific thing that he chose. He wanted to be known as a climate photographer, right? He's a grantee, award-winning documentary photographer, filmmaker. He is speaking, teaching, doing a lot of different things that I know we tend to have as goals to do with your photography career, right? But careers are built through repeated moments. So once you have that viral moment, and let's say your video goes and then it's at 10 million views, when people follow you, if they don't find similar content or you don't start publishing similar content with similar themes, then they might unfollow, right? You might lose them because, again, it begs the question, what do you want to be known for? And I suppose these are the different ways that you can engage with us as Unpublished Africa. We do have exhibitions. We run exhibitions, publish publications, and run professional development programs. And these are different ways that you can continue to engage with us. So you have your first exhibition, apply for Creative Business Studio. From there, lead a photo walk. I suppose T'Challa is a good person to have a conversation with this about, because that is the part that he took. Exhibited with us, went through a program, published with us through a publication, and then from there stepped into being a community leader and has then spoken and shared his journey and spoken about his career. And again, I suppose the question that we will leave you with is, what happens after you go viral, and what is it that you really want to be known for? Okay, thank you.
So we have an ethical storytelling toolkit that you can scan the QR code and get a download of the PDF. I guess this will help you whenever you're in the field or you're trying to practice it. Yeah, for that, this is the thank you part. The claps can now come again.
Thank you again.